It began in complete silence. No screams. No emergency calls. No one outside that room had any idea what was happening inside. Behind a closed bedroom door, a young woman was giving birth alone, without a doctor, without assistance, and without anyone who could intervene or guide what was about to happen. Time moved slowly in that space. Minutes stretched. Pain intensified. Decisions formed without support, and every passing second increased the risk of something going wrong. There was no interruption. No witness. No moment where someone stepped in and changed the direction of events. Only isolation. And sometimes, isolation changes everything. Because when no one is there to act, small decisions can carry consequences that cannot be reversed. Just hours later, a newborn would be found dead, hidden inside a trash bag. And what investigators uncovered next would turn a private moment into a national criminal case. Additional context underscores the stakes. In isolated medical events, outcomes often hinge on minutes. The absence of immediate assessment, breathing checks, positioning, or calling for assistance can transform uncertainty into irreversible harm. That is why early moments matter, and why investigators later scrutinized the very first decisions made after the birth with particular intensity. At approximately 4 a.m., Laken Snelling gave birth alone inside her off-campus residence in Lexington, Kentucky. There was no medical assistance, no witnesses, and no emergency call placed before, during, or immediately after the delivery. Investigators believe the baby fell onto the bedroom floor during the birth. In most situations, that moment would trigger immediate action, checking for breathing, calling for help, seeking medical attention. But instead, that moment marked the beginning of uncertainty. From that point forward, the timeline becomes unclear, not because nothing happened, but because what happened next depends on conflicting accounts given afterward. Snelling later provided different versions of events. In statements to police, she said the baby was not breathing. In statements to medical personnel, she reported hearing a whimper. That contradiction is critical because it defines the entire case. If the baby made any sound at all, even briefly, then the child was alive after birth. And if the child was alive, then every decision that followed becomes legally significant. After delivery, she remained inside the room. Time continued to pass, but it was not tracked or measured in any precise way. Outside, normal life continued, but inside that space, events slowed and narrowed to a single sequence of actions. According to her account, she fell asleep on top of the newborn. When she woke up, she observed that the baby had changed color, first turning blue and then purple, both recognized indicators of oxygen deprivation. What happened during that period remains unknown. There is no confirmed timeline for how long she slept, how long the child remained without oxygen, or whether there were any moments where intervention could have changed the outcome. And that uncertainty is where the entire case exists. Because within that gap, there were opportunities for action. Investigators also considered environmental factors within the room, the positioning of the newborn, the surfaces involved, and whether any movement occurred during the period of unobserved time. They examined whether any external noise, device activity, or timestamps could narrow the window of events. Even small indicators, a message sent, an app opened, a device unlocked, can help establish sequence. In this case, however, those indicators provided context but not certainty, leaving critical intervals unresolved. A call could have been made. Medical assistance could have been requested. But instead, she wrapped the newborn in a towel and remained inside the room. No emergency call was placed. No attempt was made to seek immediate help. That decision would later become a central point in the prosecution's argument. At approximately 7:30 a.m., her alarm went off. Morning had arrived, but the situation inside the room had already progressed beyond a critical threshold. What followed was not panic-driven behavior, but a series of deliberate actions. Investigators state that she began cleaning the room. Blood was removed from visible surfaces, areas were wiped down, and efforts were made to reduce physical evidence. The environment was altered. The newborn, wrapped in a towel, was placed inside a trash bag. The placenta was placed in a separate bag. Both were then hidden inside a closet. They were not immediately discarded or removed from the residence, but they were concealed. By this point, several hours had passed since the birth. Still, no medical intervention had been sought. That delay is one of the most critical elements in the case, because in situations involving medical emergencies, time directly affects survival. After completing the cleanup, she left the residence. She drove and spent time sitting in her car. The duration of that period is not precisely documented, but it represents another interval where no action was taken. She then engaged in routine behavior, including ordering food. At one point, she drove near a medical clinic. She was physically close enough to enter and request help. But she did not. She remained outside and eventually left the area. That moment has been widely discussed, not because it conclusively proves intent, but because it highlights proximity to help that was not used. It raises a critical question. At what point does inaction become a decision? At 10:34 a.m., a 911 call was placed reporting a dead baby inside a closet. When authorities arrived, the condition of the room provided immediate context. Blood was still present in certain areas. A towel containing bodily fluids was recovered. Inside a trash bag, investigators found the body of a newborn. The infant was cold and unresponsive. At that point, the timeline was no longer uncertain. The delay between birth and discovery had become clearly visible. Emergency responders pronounced the infant deceased at the scene. The body had been wrapped, contained, and hidden within the residence. Snelling was not present when authorities arrived. She was located later and taken into custody. From that point forward, the focus of the investigation shifted from discovery to reconstruction. Investigators needed to determine not only what happened, but when it happened, and whether those actions met the legal threshold for criminal responsibility. 4 days later, formal charges were filed. These included abuse of a corpse, tampering with physical evidence, and concealing the birth of an infant. She entered a plea of not guilty. However, one central question remained unresolved. Was the baby born alive? Because the answer to that question would determine whether additional charges were justified. Investigators examined her digital activity as part of the case. They identified pregnancy-related searches, indicators that the pregnancy may have been concealed, and deleted images that were later recovered. Prosecutors argue that this pattern demonstrates awareness and preparation. However, awareness alone does not establish intent. And that distinction plays a key role in how the case is interpreted. The medical examiner concluded that the baby was born alive. The cause of death was determined to be asphyxia of undetermined means. This conclusion is critical. It confirms that the infant died due to a lack of oxygen. However, it does not establish how that oxygen deprivation occurred. There is no confirmed mechanism, no definitive sequence, and no single explanation. That gap introduces legal complexity. In March 2026, a grand jury returned a new charge, first-degree manslaughter. This represented a significant escalation in the case. The potential sentence for this charge ranges from 10 to 20 years in prison. The addition of this charge indicates that prosecutors believe there is sufficient evidence to argue criminal responsibility, even without full certainty regarding the exact sequence of events. several key questions remain unanswered. The exact time of death has not been definitively established. The precise cause of the asphyxia is not confirmed. It is unclear whether the death resulted from intentional action, accidental circumstances, or delayed medical response. These uncertainties are not minor details. They are the foundation of the case. Because in criminal law, outcomes depend not only on what may have happened, but on what can be proven with certainty. As of now, the case remains active. The manslaughter charge stands alongside the original charges. Snelling remains under legal supervision and is awaiting trial. No final verdict has been reached. One room, one moment, and a series of decisions made within a limited window of time. A sequence of actions that now carries long-term legal consequences. Because in cases like this, the central issue is not only what happened, but what can be proven and what cannot. The broader question extends beyond a single case. It reflects how gaps in time, gaps in action, and gaps in information can converge. When timelines cannot be fixed and mechanisms cannot be confirmed, the legal system must weigh what is known against what remains uncertain. That balance between evidence and doubt ultimately determines how responsibility is assigned.